I remember standing in a refinery control room back in the late 80s, looking at this whole bank of chart recorders for a boiler system. The lead operator, he points to a line that's just kind of hovering around this 78% thermal efficiency mark. And he says to me, with a lot of pride, she's running steady. And you know what? At the time, that was a good day. That was considered a job well done. Seeing that same number today, well, that would trigger an immediate, full-scale investigation. It's just incredible to think about the sheer scale of energy waste we used to accept as normal. I've seen it firsthand for over 40 years. And really, that's been the common thread through my entire career. It honestly doesn't matter if you're talking about a brand new state-of-the-art chemical plant or a power station that's been running for 30 years. The basic physics of pressure and heat, they don't change. And neither, it seems, do the ways we just let all that energy escape. It's this massive problem that's hiding in plain sight. It's written in every steam plume you see and every pipe that's warm to the touch.
That's such a powerful image, Edmund. It really points to this kind of institutional acceptance of waste that's, well, it's pretty hard for us to grasp today. That 78% figure you saw scribbled on a chart recorder is now just one data point in a much, much bigger story. So let's really dig in and quantify the true scale of that inefficiency gap.
Exactly. And look, we're not talking about small, little incremental gains here. The difference between that old 78% standard and a modern condensing boiler system that can run at 98%, that's a staggering 20 percentage point gap. Now, stretch that across an entire industry, that 20% represents billions, with a B, billions of euros in wasted fuel and completely needless emissions year after year. It is literally the difference between legacy design and what we can actually achieve now with proper control and heat recovery. A 20-point gap, that's a massive target for improvement. So when you're on site, boots on the ground, what are the biggest culprits? Where is all that energy actually escaping from the system?
Oh, it's a depressingly consistent list, I can tell you. The biggest, loudest offender almost every single time is steam traps. You can walk into an older facility and find that a quarter of them have failed open, just hemorrhaging high-pressure steam straight to the atmosphere. After that, it's all the basic things people forget. Pipes that should be insulated but are bare, heat exchangers that are just slowly choking with buildup, and every single one is a significant and, more importantly, a correctable loss.
And fixing those losses, well, the way we do that has changed dramatically, hasn't it? You've said before that the biggest shift you've seen in your career wasn't in metallurgy or vessel design, but right there in the control room. It seems the move from analog to digital has completely redefined what it means to be an inspector.
Without a doubt. The most profound shift in my 40 years on the job wasn't about better steel. It was about better data. We've gone from being, physical detectives to digital forensic investigators. The evidence trail isn't on a clipboard anymore, it's on a server.
Back in the 90s, an inspection meant clipboards, thick logbooks filled with handwritten notes, and physically walking the plant to check gauges. Now, the very first thing I ask for is the audit trail from the distributed control system, the DCS. I want to see every single pressure excursion, every alarm that went off, every single time an operator had to switch a control loop to manual. That digital log, it's now as crucial for assessing safety and conformity as an ultrasonic scan of a weld. It tells me the real story of how that plant has been operated, not just the idealized version in the design documents. Right, and that data-driven approach is now actually formalized in our safety standards. When we talk about these automated safety systems, you'll hear a key term come up, SIL. For everyone listening, a safety integrity level, or SIL, is basically a formal way of measuring the reliability of a safety system. It's all laid out in the international standard IEC 61511. It puts a number on the risk reduction that a system gives you, like a system that stops a vessel from overpressurizing. And for high-risk equipment, verifying this is now a huge part of your assessment, Edmund. That's absolutely right. And the quality of that safety function, and frankly, the entire control system, it all depends entirely on the quality of the data coming in. The sensors we use today, well, they're what made this whole digital revolution possible in the first place.
Okay, so let's talk about that evolution. Because the ability to actually trust that DCS audit trail is directly tied to how sophisticated the instruments feeding it are. How has that technology changed over your career?
Oh, it's like night and day. In 1984, all we had were analog gauges. You literally had to trust your own eyes. Then, in the 90s, we got the first electronic transmitters, which was a huge leap. But then the 2010s brought wireless protocols like wireless HART. Suddenly, we could put sensors on remote parts of the plant that were total blind spots before, and we could spot leaks or failing insulation. And now, In the 2020s, we've got fixed thermal imaging cameras tied right into the control system, constantly scanning for hotspots. We can literally see the energy being lost in real time. These new sensors aren't just measuring, they're diagnosing their own health, which gives us a level of trust in the data that we just never, ever had before.
Okay, so we have better control systems, and they're being fed by much smarter sensors. Let's ground all this in reality. Can you give us a few specific, anonymized examples from your actual field reports where this tech has made a concrete, measurable difference to both efficiency and safety?
Of course. The theory is one thing, but it's the results out in the field that really matter. I've got 3 cases that I think illustrate the impact perfectly.
Okay, so the first one was at a refinery over in Central Europe. They had a crucial heat exchanger that was just heavily fouled. It was operating at only 61% of its design efficiency. To make up for it, they were just burning more and more fuel in another heater downstream. So they installed a simple network of temperature sensors and fed that data into a predictive model. This allowed them to schedule their cleaning based on actual performance, not just some date on a calendar. The result? They recovered 23% of the lost heat duty. And get this, that was enough to take an entire fired heater out of continuous service.
So that's a direct, massive fuel saving right there. But what about the connection between better control and the actual life of the asset?
Well, this second case from a chemical plant in Germany is a perfect example of that. They had a group of process vessels that were suffering from chronic pressure cycling. The pressure was just constantly going up and down, all because of a poorly tuned control loop in their DCS. By putting in an advanced process control, or APC, algorithm, they stabilized the whole system. The pressure variance was reduced by 67%. Now, the immediate energy saving was pretty small, but the really crucial outcome was the reduction in that cyclical stress on the vessels themselves. An engineering analysis estimated it added an extra 18 years to their fatigue life. That's a multi-million euro replacement program they just kicked down the road, all thanks to better software.
And the third case, this was at a petrochemical site in the UK, brings us right back to my old nemesis, those steam traps I mentioned. They rolled out a wireless acoustic monitoring system across their entire 3-kilometer steam network. The system basically just listened for the telltale sound signatures of failed traps. It very quickly found 34 traps that had failed in the open position. Once those were repaired, their steam consumption dropped by 8,400 tons a year. That works out to a direct CO2 reduction of 1,900 tons annually. To put that in perspective, that's like taking hundreds of cars off the road for good.
Those are incredibly powerful examples of what's already possible. So let's shift gears and look forward. Based on all these trends, you've laid out 5 key predictions for the next decade. I'd love to go through each one and maybe play devil's advocate a little bit.
Please do. The future is rarely as straightforward as we think it's going to be.
All right, my first prediction is that AI tools, specifically these large language models we're all hearing about, will start to pre-analyze the enormous technical files we have to review. Imagine an AI that can cross-reference thousands of pages of drawings, calculations, and material certificates, and then flag any potential issues for the human inspector to focus on.
I can definitely see the appeal in terms of speed, Edmund, but the whole pressure equipment directive is built on human judgment and experience. Can an AI really understand the nuance in a complex design calculation or a welding procedure? Aren't we running the risk of over-reliance here, where we just start accepting the AI's pass without the human scrutiny that's kept these plants safe for decades?
My next prediction is that we're going to move away from these fixed, time-based inspection intervals. Inspecting a vessel every 5 years, whether it needs it or not. I see us moving towards continuous online monitoring. Think about permanently installed sensor arrays like phased array ultrasound on critical welds, feeding data back in real time. We'd inspect based on the actual condition, not just the date on the calendar.
The technology is certainly getting there, I'll give you that. But 2 big challenges jump out at me. First, data overload. How does a plant operator manage, let alone interpret, a terabyte of ultrasonic data coming in every single day? And second, what about the regulators? The entire legal and insurance framework is built on those periodic documented inspections. How long will it take for them to accept a black box of continuous data as being equivalent to a human inspector physically signing off a report?
My third point is, well, it's less of a prediction and more of a warning. The shift to a hydrogen economy presents a monumental compliance challenge. Hydrogen has this tiny little molecule that embrittles steel and escapes through seals in ways that natural gas just doesn't. This is going to demand a wholesale rethink of our material science, our weld procedures, our system designs, everything. It is by far the biggest technical hurdle I see on the horizon.
And it's not just a technical hurdle, is it? It's a massive economic one. Retrofitting or replacing huge networks of existing pressure equipment to be hydrogen-ready, we're talking about a capital cost in the trillions of euros globally. Is the economic case and the political will really going to be strong enough to drive that change at the pace we need for our climate targets? Or are we going to see people cutting corners on compliance just to get things done?
Well, that leads me straight to my fourth prediction. I believe the European Commission will eventually have no choice but to embed energy performance directly into the legal framework. Right now, the Pressure Equipment Directive, the PED, is purely a safety directive, but I foresee a future revision where minimum energy efficiency thresholds become a legal condition of conformity, just like weld quality is today.
Now that would be a game changer. But Edmund, the PED has always been firewalled as what they call a new approach directive, focused only on health and safety so that goods can move freely. If you start integrating energy efficiency, which is a performance metric, couldn't that be seen as a trade barrier? Do you really think the political will exists in Brussels to merge the safety and climate agendas so directly into one law? That would be an incredibly contentious move.
And for my final prediction, I'm going with something that's actually already legislated, the Digital Product Passport, or DPP. Starting in 2027, this is going to be mandatory for a lot of industrial products. It means every single piece of pressure equipment will carry a digital record of its entire life, from the carbon footprint of the steel it was made from, to its operational efficiency, all the way to how it can be recycled at the end of its life.
Wow. The implications of that are just profound. I mean, it creates radical transparency. For a plant manager, it means they can compare the total life cycle impact of one vessel versus another before they even buy it. For the circular economy, it's absolutely essential. But it also puts this enormous data management burden on manufacturers. It fundamentally changes what a product is. It's not just a physical thing anymore. It's the thing plus its lifelong data stream.
Edmund, this has been an absolutely fascinating look at the past, the present, and the potential future. So to close this out, let's distill it all down. If you could give just one piece of actionable advice to a plant manager who's listening right now, what is the single most important thing they should do this year to improve both the efficiency and the safety of their pressure systems?
My advice is simple, and it won't cost you a single penny in new equipment. Your DCS audit trail is a goldmine of information that you are almost certainly not using to its full potential. Go back and analyze the last 12 months of your data. Look at your pressure excursions, find your most frequent alarm activations, and check every single time an operator had to take a system into manual control. That data is telling you exactly where your process is unstable, where your equipment is under stress, and where your energy is being wasted. The answers for a safer, more efficient future, they're already recorded on your servers. You just have to look.
That is powerful and direct advice. And it leaves us with a final question for everyone listening, and really for the industry as a whole. As these lines between safety, cost, and climate continue to blur, will efficiency stop being just a commercial goal and instead become a non-negotiable condition of your license to operate? The evidence we've talked about today suggests that future might be a lot closer than many of us think.